Hello friends, so I'm starting with the first session of the 4 consecutive sessions I'm going to take on this valuation course. I'm going to take you through many concepts related to finance and along with one Ind AS later on, Ind AS 113. Now what I'm going to do in my session, there will be 4 different parts. My session will be divided into 4 different parts. Every day, first part will be content part. Part 1, content. That is concepts. Number 2, I'll give you some reference materials. I'll give you some links to websites where you can find some useful material for your preparation of exam. You might be knowing some of them already, but there will be some new ones also. Number 3, strategic tip of the day. All 4 days I'll discuss one separate tip. Some of you might be knowing it, some of you may get benefited out of it more. Number 4, whatever time will permit, we'll do objective type questions for the concepts covered in relevant class. Now if this 4th part cannot be completed, for example today I'm having 45 questions. If they will not be completed, I'll share that in the group. The answers next morning I'll share, and problems we can take offline. So this is the way all my 4 sessions will go. The major part, 70-80% part of the lecture will be on concepts, 5 minutes on reference materials, 5 minutes on tips of the day, not even 5 minutes, less than that. And last, whatever time is left, 10-15 minutes or whatever, on questions. And questions, even if not done, I'll give you offline, which you can perform. Next day morning, you'll get the answers also, which you can check, and we can discuss the problems offline. This is the way all the sessions will be done. So, the concepts of the day, they revolve around the topic number 2, which is mentioned in the syllabus. This is finance and decisions in finance. Finance and decisions in finance. So what I'm going to talk, I'm first going to talk meaning of financial management, objectives quickly, then decisions. In those decisions, I'm going to talk at length about the investment decision, long-term investment decision, capital bursting decision. So, what is financial management? I'm giving you one of the appropriate definitions here. There can be multiple definitions possible. Financial management is that managerial activity which is concerned with acquiring, financing, and managing assets to accomplish the overall goal of a business. I don't need you need to have rectification of any definition. This is the definition everybody knows. It is the managerial activity which is concerned with acquiring finance, acquiring asset, financing asset and managing asset to accomplish overall goal of a business. Now, what are objectives of this financial management? There are a variety of thoughts, two different types of thought. One category says profit maximization, while the other one says wealth maximization. For me, both are interrelated. If profit gets maximized, wealth will also get maximized. If wealth is more, profit earning on that will be more. They are interrelated for sure. But this is profit maximization is seen as narrow objective. Wealth maximization is broader perspective. So we are focusing more on wealth maximization. We say value of firm should maximize. Throughout finance, we keep on talking about value of the firm or value of equity shareholder, which will result in maximization of value of firm also. Now, here we say value of firm is a function of three types of decisions: investment decision, financing decision, dividend decision. This is the next topic that I'll elaborate today. That is the main topic for the day. So this is investment decision, financing decision, dividend decision. So three types of decisions will make value of a firm. Now, investment decision is further classified into two types: long-term investment decision, short-term investment decision. Now, this is covered under techniques called capital budgeting techniques. Capital budgeting techniques. Your syllabus says you should know in detail the capital budgeting techniques. They are all mentioned in the new syllabus which is given there. Short-term investment decision is working capital management. Working capital management. Now, let me relate the three types of decisions the finance manager is doing. First of all, when you are starting a business, you will assess the requirements of business. What is the plant and machinery required, land and building required, all these things required, all those capital assets required. We total them out. We say we will need 10 crore to start this business. Now, all these machines and all will not start working unless there is inventory, adequate cash in business. Now, they are covered under working capital. 10 crore required for fixed assets, 2 crore required for working capital. I get to know total requirement is 12 crore. Now, I have to decide from where to get this money. From where to get this 12 crore. This is with the help of financing decision. What are the sources of finance? Equity share capital, in a running company, reserve surplus, preference share capital, all kinds of debts, bank loan, debentures, all these various things are there from where we can get the money. For the purpose of working capital, we can even take the short-term financing. It is preferable not to use short-term finance for the long-term assets. It's a wrong mismatch. So financing decision covers all this. If you take more debt, then what will happen? Is it good? Is this bad? Ask any businessman who has taken excessive debt in the times of COVID. How is he feeling? He is feeling the heat. Because lots of fixed cost is being incurred without earning anything much in this bad situation. So financing decision, you try to think about how much risk can you take, how many months you can remain even without the revenue. If there is heavy risk, obviously, the insolvency professionals are ready to do their work. So, what I am trying to say, financing decision is another decision. Then you earn lot of profits, let's say, in first year, second year, third year, whatever. Then a decision comes whether I should pay off that profit to the shareholders as dividend or I should retain the money. There are many models there. I am naming there here itself because dividend decision will not come as a separate topic. I am just talking little bit here. There are few authors who say dividend affects market value of firm. This is called dividend relevance approach. And there are few people who says dividend has no bearing on market value of firm. Dividend has no bearing on market value of firm. This is dividend irrelevance approach. To name a few, here there is a gentleman called Walter and there is another one called Gordon. And here it is Modigliani and Miller approach. Single theory, very famous for its assumptions. Lots of assumptions which may not be correct in the market scenario. But they have proved theoretically that if you pay dividend, the market price of the firm, market value of the firm will remain stable, will not change. Whereas here, Walter and Gordon, they are saying, in some circumstances, it is good to pay dividend. In some circumstances, it is bad to pay dividend. I'll just take 2 minutes to logically explain this. Walter and Gordon, they are simply saying, if rate of return of company exceeds expected rate of return of shareholders, which is KE, this is R. If rate of return of company exceeds expected rate of return of shareholders, then lesser dividend is better. Because you can earn better than the shareholders can earn. Then market value of firm will be maximized if you can retain that earning. Don't pay dividends. If it is reverse, if KE is more than R, pay off dividends. Pay off dividends. That will maximize the market value of the firm. That is simple logic on which they have given. Obviously, their formulas are different, but results are same. Whereas Modigliani and Miller says, you pay dividend, you retain all the money, the market value of firm will not change, market value of firm will remain exactly same. This is about dividend decision. Financing decision, separately you will keep on getting few links. Our main concepts of the day revolve around long-term investment decision, that is capital budgeting techniques, which involves various categories, involve some time value of money concepts also. Now I reach the long-term investment decisions in detail. I'll go through a text which will include all the techniques, their advantages, disadvantages, everything, how to make computations. You don't need to note it because I'll share this document with you. It's a long document, but try to understand every small component of this capital busting techniques. It starts with meaning of capital busting. Capital busting refers to the process of identification, evaluation, analysis and selection of what? Selection of new projects, expansion projects, diversification projects, modernization projects, replacement projects, or any other investment decision, the returns wherefrom are expected to extend over a period of more than 1 year. So simply, capital busting is a never ending process for any business. We identify, we evaluate, we analyze, select what? New projects, expansion projects, diversification projects, modernization, replacement, or any other project where return is expected to be for more than 1 year. Diversification is in different area, expansion is in same area, modernization is something like computerization, for example. Replacement, when the asset is life is gone, you are replacing it with new one. It will involve modernization as well as replacement. So all such projects, when you are thinking about where the money is to be spent, we are applying the techniques called capital busting techniques. In other words, all major decisions pertaining to fixed assets, majorly fixed asset decisions, are covered under capital busting, although there is working capital changes also which are included there, having long-term effect. So this is capital busting decision that we are talking. Reasons for importance, one line on this each. Why capital busting decision is important? Long-term implication. If I do something wrong today, it will not affect my 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, may affect my 10 years of life. A wrong investment in a machinery will trouble me every day in the life of that machinery or till the time it is replaced. Large amount involved. I have to spend 10 rupees on a pen. I'll think a lot. I'll ask him, give me the pen having a good grip. Give me the pen which is not having any smudging. So many things. So when I'm putting large amount, crores of rupees, lakhs of rupees, obviously the decision is more important. It is irreversible. Irreversible decision. Cannot reverse immediately. I cannot sell off the asset immediately without losses. So decision is not reversible. In case you are taking a debtor policy decision, I increase the credit period from 1 month to 2 months. It does not favor me. I can immediately go back to the older policy. Inventory decision. Instead of 1 month inventory, I start keeping 2 month inventory. The sale does not pick up. I can reverse it. But capital busting decision is irreversible. Cannot reverse it. They're difficult to make decisions because so many projections involved. Even a small projection goes wrong, the business will be in danger. Many projections related to last financial year and current financial year, they have gone wrong due to this COVID. The projection of GDP growth for the economy, they said 8%, international agencies said 5%. Now they are talking about 2%, 1.9%. So they are difficult decisions. Long-term decisions are difficult decisions because they involve so much of projection which may go wrong. Let's go to the main thing, techniques. There are two categories of techniques, broad two categories. Techniques which consider time value of money and techniques which do not consider time value of money. First, I'll talk about techniques not considering time value of money. Are they relevant? Not much. The first technique I will talk only due to the reason of understanding its criticisms. If you understand negativities of that technique, you will appreciate the positivities of next techniques. So I'm starting with first category, techniques not considering time value of money. They are also called traditional techniques, conventional techniques, unsophisticated techniques, non-DCF techniques, non-discounted cash flow techniques. What discounting means, I'll elaborate later. The techniques which are not considering time value of money, they are called traditional techniques. First in this category, this is the worst of all techniques. Why we study it? Because it is very simple. And number two, to understand its criticisms. This is called accounting rate of return or average rate of return technique. Now simply, what does an investor look for? He looks for ROI, return on investment. What is simple? Return on investment ratio. Profit divided by investment into 100. So what a 10th class student can tell. Profit divided by investment into 100. Now here, my investor is looking at after tax profit and average annual profit after tax. Annual profit after tax divided by investment. Investment can be gross, investment can be net, and investment can be average. Depending on that, they have given 5-6 formulas. I will not go for all of them for your requirement because you don't require this technique at all. I'm just quickly going through this. Average profit after tax divided by, let us say, average investment into 100. And average investment they compute as cost plus salvage whole divided by 2. Cost, many people say minus salvage. That becomes net investment. We are talking average investment. Cost minus salvage is net investment. Initial cost is gross investment. Cost plus salvage whole divided by 2 is average investment. Now this return he computes for 2, 3, 4 projects, whichever gives highest average rate of return, he will rank that project as 1 and so on. This is a technique given. Good for students, not very necessary for us. I need you to understand its criticisms. All text is given there in this, but I will not go through the text here because that is unnecessary for you. So I go on to mainly criticisms here. Yes. Disadvantages of this technique. It uses accounting profit and not cash profit, cash inflows for evaluating the project. This is the only technique to ignore cash inflows. I go to my businessman, I tell him, I want you to invest 10 crore. He says, what I will get? You will get 3 crore accounting profit every year. He says, to hell with accounting profit, tell me my cash profit. I'm investing in cash, my outflow is in cash. So tell my return in cash only, cash inflow. He is interested in cash inflow, not in accounting profit. This is the only technique which uses accounting profit. So that is why I rejected the technique. We rarely use it. It's a rough technique. It's even not mentioned in your valuation syllabus. Other 4 techniques are mentioned. So very importantly, first criticism, it is using accounting profit and not the cash profits. It ignores time value of money. That I'll talk in detail as I reach the second category of techniques. Time value of money is important part. It considers rupee earned after 1 year and after 5th year as the same. whereas technically they are not same. There is project 1, it is earning cash inflow or earning whatever 10,000, 20,000, 30,000. Other one is earning 30,000, 20,000, 10,000. Their average return will be same, annual 20,000. But if I consider time value of money, second project is better than first. If I ignore time value of money, I am simply doing average of these. Obviously for me both the projects are equally good. Decision goes wrong. I must appreciate more cash coming early into my business. So second project is giving more cash in the beginning, less cash in the end. That should be preferable. So this limitation, it is ignoring time value of money. It is ignoring size of investment. I tell you, there is one business where we are going to earn 30%. In other business, I am going to earn 300%. Simple decision, select the second one. The problem is, first business is Reliance Infocom business requiring 10,000 crore of investment. And second business is getting into a ready of burger. Obviously it gives me 300%. But size of investment is totally different, can't compare. Only comparable projects can be compared under this approach. If size of investment is different, it will be foolish to decide on the basis of percentage only. You have to look into size of investment, then only you can compare. In other techniques like NPV, net present value, even if projects are of different amounts, correct selection will be made on the basis of that NPV value. Here it is not so. It ignores the size of investment. They are all limitations of this. The second technique is little more relevant. It is mentioned in your syllabus also. It is to be understood easy technique. Still ignoring time value of money. That limitation stays. It ignores time value of money. Payback period. Definition is most important thing. Once you understand the definition, things can be understood. Payback period, period within which cost of project will be completely recovered. My businessman says, I invest 10 crore. How much will I get back every year? I say every year you will get 4 crore. He computes in 2.5 years by 10 crore will be back and I will start earning cash profit further. In another project, he is getting 4-year figure. So lesser it is, better it is, payback period. He will select the project having lower payback period. Earlier you get back your basic money, that is sort of break even. After 2.5 years, everything is my profit. So your computings, there can be two types of cash inflows, uniform or non-uniform. If the cash inflows are uniform, you are computing cost of project divided by annual cash inflow. Annual cash inflow after tax. From there you are getting payback period easily. If it is non-uniform, first year 5 crore, second year 3 crore, third year 2 crore, I compute, I add, yes, in 3 years I am getting back 10 crore. That is called accumulation way of computing payback period. When cash flows are not uniform, we use accumulation method. That is explained further. It represents period within which businessman will be returned back his initial cash outlay in the form of cash profits. There can be two situations, uniform and non-uniform. In uniform, the formula is written there. Formula is cash outlay divided by annual CFAT. It is written here. Annual cash inflow after tax. Non-uniform cash inflows. What is non-uniform cash inflow? Non-uniform means every year you are getting different amount of cash inflow. In that case, we use accumulation. As I said, 10 crore is outlay. First year, I'm getting 5 crore. Second year, 3 crore. Third year, 2 crore. Fourth year, fifth year, whatever. I'm not interested in that part. In 3 years, you are getting. If in third year, I'm getting, let us say 4 crore. Then what? During third year, I'm getting the payback period. But total 3 years is not a payback period. In third year, I need 2 crore out of 4 crore. So what I get? 8 crore in 2 years. 4 crore third year. Need 2 crore divided by 4 crore. 0.5 year. So 2.5 years, I can call it 2 years 6 months is my payback period. So whenever a full year is not needed, I need to compute fraction. I'll compute the fraction and get the payback period in fraction. Acceptance rule. They create some standard payback period. They create some standard payback period. Higher than this is rejected, lower than this is accepted. There is subjectivity. Every management will have to create that standard. Lower it is, better it is. If you are ranking them, lowest is rank 1, higher is rank 2, highest is last rank. It is simple, costless, they are all advantages. Disadvantages, size of investment still ignored. Ready business, Reliance Infocom, if compared, obviously ready business will give you earlier payback period. Does not mean that it is a good business or better business than Reliance Infocom. Does not consider all returns. After payback period, one project gives 1 crore return. The other project having longer payback period will give 1000 crore returns after payback. We have ignored post payback period, post payback returns. Everything we have ignored. Bad thing. Ignores time value of money. So many things given there. Then techniques considering time value of money. The concept of time value of money I'm explaining next in a separate segment of the video. So starting with the first concept, basics of time value of money. I'll start with a very simple example which will help you understand the basic concept of time value of money. I go to one of my friends, Mr. X. I ask him, give me rupees 10,000. I return after 3 years rupees 10,000. Now, if that person is a rational person, he will say, no, I will not give. My question to you is, will you give me that 10,000 that I'm going to return exact 10,000 after 3 years from today? Answer is no, you should not give. Forget the love, respect, whatever. Forget that. Be rational, be logical. I'm not saying exactly be money minded, but still 10,000, returned 10,000 after 3 years. Not logical. I want to get reasons. Why not? Now the reasons are explained by money theory in economics. This chapter in CA Inter Economics for Finance, money concepts. There is a theory which explains the reasons for this. Number 1, uncertainty. implying risk. The person is taking the risk by giving me money. Anything can happen to me. COVID-19 is going on. Anything can happen. Even otherwise, life is very uncertain. Even I may run away with the money. There is risk. So to bear the risk, the other party will like to take the return. Premium is desired for the risk. Higher the risk, higher the premium will be desired. If there is more reliance on me, less risk. Lower interest can be charged. But if there is very less reliance on me, higher rate of interest should be charged. Because risk is more, premium charged in the form of interest should be more. Uncertainty. Let us assume there is no uncertainty. You are giving the money to the government and normally it is risk free. There is no risk. Will you then accept the proposal? Give 30,000, take 30,000? Answer is still no. Second reason. Opportunity cost of funds involved. Mr. X says, if I put this 10,000 in simple FD of my bank, let us say bare minimum 5% he is getting. Every year, 500 rupees he will earn. In 3 years, ignoring compounding, simple interest, he will get 1500 in 3 years. So by giving that money to me, he is getting only 10,000 after 3 years. From bank, he will get 11,500. So why should he give that money to me? He will deposit that in the bank and earn little bit. So at least 1500 I should be giving him. So that is second point. Number 3. Individual consumption preferences. If I tell you there is no uncertainty, there is no bank who can give you interest, can you still give me that money for 3 years? Answer is still no. You will have some plans in your mind. If I get 10,000, I will buy this, I will do this, I will do this. Why will you delay that for 3 years for me only? You will first focus on your individual consumption preferences. And consumption, there is never ending list. If one consumption is fulfilled, another you will have to do. So you will not like to postpone your individual consumption for me until unless I am giving you more. For 10,000 I give you 15,000. You will say yes, I can consume more after 3 years. Then you may be interested. But giving back same money after 3 years, you will not be interested at all. So due to these 3 reasons, there is time value of money. There is a 4th reason also added, which is inflation. This is not there in the economics theory, but in practical, yes, inflation is also there. The quantity you can buy today, after 3 years, same product quantity, same quantity you will not be able to buy because of inflation. There are no economies with deflation. Most of economies are having inflation. And little bit of inflation is good for economy also. So inflation also causes time value of money. What is the conclusion from there? Conclusion is a rupee earned today and rupee earned after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, they are not same. Today's 1 rupee has more value than 1 rupee after 1 year, 2 year or 3 year. This is a tendency which is called time value of money. So I'm defining this time value of money. Any rational investor when given a choice to receive a sum of money now or a future point of time will prefer to own that money now. This tendency of a rational investor is termed as time value of money. Under finance analysis, the time value of money is computed by using discounting concept. So here I introduce the concept of discounting. Now to understand discounting, you should be knowing the compounding. They are reverse of each other. So what is compounding concept? I go to bank, deposit 10,000 rupees today. Throughout analysis, we must be sure about the time period. We use the language that should be commonly understood by everybody, year-end language. So today is 0 year end. If anywhere, any question or any place, it is written at the beginning of 5th year, you call it 4th year, because our language is year end language. Beginning of 5th year is 4th year. So today is beginning of 1st year for the project. Beginning of 1st year is 0 year. So year end. Today I am going to bank and depositing 10,000. Let us say 10% per annum compound rate of interest is what bank is giving you. It is too much but calculation is easy, I am taking this. Otherwise 10% no bank is giving even on FD. That is too much rate of interest. Year 1, opening 10,000, interest 1,000, ending my balance is 11,000. Presuming I am not withdrawing any amount, it is FD for 5 years. Second year 11,000, 1,100, 12,100. Third year 12,100, 1210, 13310. Fourth year 13310, 1331. What you are getting? 13,310 plus 10%, 14,641. Fifth year 14,641, 10%, 1464.10. Once I add, I am getting 16105.10. This is a very simple table that we get in compounding. Rupees 10,000 invested today will have value of 16105.10 at the end of 5th year. Now, under my discounted cash flow techniques, I'll be knowing the project inflows at the end of first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. I want to get today's value. From higher value, I want to reach the lower value. That is called discounting. Getting today's value from future value. This is a simple formula for compounding. Future value of a single cash flow is equal to present value of inflow multiplied by 1 plus r raised to power n. R is rate of interest for the compounding period. N is number of compounding periods. Sometimes compounding is done on 6 monthly basis. Then above table is incorrect. In that case, after every 6 months, I need to update my balance, and then on updated balance, I have to do the compounding. My interest will be more. If compounding is quarterly, interest will be even more. So in this formula, present value is 10,000. Rate of interest here was 10% because compounding was annual. Number of years was 5, and my answer will be 16105.10. If compounding is 6 monthly, my R will become 5%, my N will become 10 periods. If compounding is quarterly, R will become 2.5% and N will become, how many quarters are there in 5 years? 20 quarters. That will become 20. So accordingly, my future value will change. Now, future value is another name of amount. In basics of maths, in 3rd class that we study, this is amount and this is what? Principal. That is what we study in small classes. Principal and amount. Here we use the word present value and future value. This is concept of compounding. Concept of compounding. Now, discounting is reverse. You know the future value, you want to get the present value. So, formula changes little bit here. In discounting, present value of a cash inflow is equal to future value multiplied by 1 divided by 1 plus r raised to power n. The details are same. R is rate for the compounding period, n is number of compounding periods which are involved. So this is the formula which will be used throughout to get the discounting. Having got the discounting rate, we can apply the following steps in most of the modern techniques. Most of the modern techniques shall be solved with the help of this. Most importantly, net present value technique. Most important technique is NPV. Now what I should do? Determine cash inflows and cash outflows at the end of every year. Our language has to be year-end language. If any question says they are investing at the beginning of third year, I will not call it third year. I'll call it second year. Third year end is as good as second year. Third year beginning is as good as second year end. When you are investing, beginning of first year should be called 0 year. Today is 0 year when I am starting to invest in my project. Today I invest, I'll start getting inflow at the end of first year, second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. More investment needed in fourth year beginning, I'll call it third year outflow. So identify or determine cash inflows and outflows at the end of every year starting from year 0. Year 0 is more or less outflow. In the beginning you normally do outflow. You don't start getting inflow in the beginning of the project. That is first step. Second step, determine discounting rate. Your next topic later on cost of capital will tell you how to compute the discounting rate. It is virtually WACC, weighted average cost of capital. So determine the discounting rate. Determine present value factors based on above discounting rate can be given, seen in table, computed on calculator. As I talked earlier, 1 divided by 1 plus r raised to power n. This is called discounting factor or PV factor. Present value factor. 1 divided by 1 plus r raised to power n. Now make a table. My table will have 4 columns. Year, cash inflow, PV factor, PVCI. You can make it in Excel or otherwise also you can do. You don't have to solve big practical questions, but computation done like this. Year 1, 2, 3, 4, inflows already computed, PV factor, depending on discounting factor, will get multiply then PVCI. If there are multiple outflows, make a table for PVCO also. If there is single investment at the beginning of 0 year, then that is PVCO, because its present value will be same. Get PVCI, get PVCO. Once you deduct them, you will get NPV. Sigma PVCI minus sigma PVCO. This is sigma PVCI. Sigma means aggregate. Sigma PVCI minus sigma PVCO will give you NPV. If you divide them, you get a profitability index, which is another technique. I go on to techniques. First one given there, discounted payback period. Discounted payback period. The definition will explain everything. Discounted payback period indicates the period within which discounted cash inflows equal to discounted cash outflows involved in the project. Concentrate on difference between payback period and discounted payback period. There it was, payback period is a period in which initial cash outlay is recovered in the form of annual cash inflows. Here it is in the form of discounted cash inflows. That is the only difference. Here you will never be having uniform discounted cash inflows. Some coincidence in a question may make it, but otherwise not possible. Practically not possible. So what you will be applying always? Apply accumulation concept. Make that table. Year, cash inflow, PV factor, PVCI. Now instead of accumulating cash inflow, you will accumulate this. Keep on computing aggregate PVCI. In whichever year you are able to get sigma PVCO, within that year is discounted payback period. My simple question is payback period longer or discounted payback period longer? There is a confusion many times in the minds. Which will be longer? Payback period or discounted payback period? Discounted is always longer. Because at the end of 1 year, you are not counting it 1 rupee. At the end of 1 year, if it is, let's say 1 lakh rupees, you are counting it 90,000 rupees, for example, depending on discounting rate. You are reducing the value of every rupee. So more years will be required to get same outflow. So certainly, discounted payback period is longer than payback period. Advantage, disadvantage you can read. NPV is most important technique because in every project we are surely applying the NPV. NPV is a method of calculating PVCI and PVCO on project by using cost of capital at discounting rate, finding NPV by subtracting present value of cash outflows from present value of cash inflows. This is the formula. In table we have computed discounted cash inflows and discounted cash outflows, subtract them NPV. Acceptance rule, positive is a good project, negative is a bad project. When you are comparing many projects, highest is the best project. Highest positive NPV is the best project. Advantage, disadvantage you can read through on your own later on. Internal rate of return, another important technique. Definition is important. Internal rate of return is the rate at which discounted cash inflows match with discounted cash outflows. It is that rate at which sigma PVCI equals sigma PVCO. That is where NPV is 0. What does it indicate? It indicates rate of return on the project after considering cost of capital, after considering the discounting factors. So we are going to calculate this for every project. It is to be compared with cost of capital. If it is higher than cost of capital, project is viable. If it is lower, it is unviable. For many projects, when you are comparing, higher the IRR, better it is. Higher IRR project will be better project. There are situations where there is a conflict in decision making as per NPV and IRR. NPV undoubtedly is a better technique than IRR because IRR has still some statistical flaws. So certainly NPV and IRR normally they will not have any contradiction. If the inflows are distributed as per normal distribution, then you will not find a different answer as per NPV and IRR selection of projects. But if it is what they call skewed cash inflows, then IRR will give you some wrong conclusions. Hence, NPV will be better technique than IRR. Now, to compute IRR, some easy steps are given. They are given for students. You can also make use of this, but at your level, let me tell you, you don't need these. Reason, you are allowed to use Excel in your exam. In Excel, you can apply formula is equal to IRR and you can put all inflows in commas. First outflow and then inflows. From there you will be getting the IRR directly. But for those who want to learn it seriously, they can apply these steps. You start with some trial rate. Based on trial rate, get NPV. If you get positive NPV, increase the trial rate. If you get negative NPV, lower the trial rate. Then get two rates, one with positive, one with negative NPV, and lower the difference in the trial rates, better will be the result. And then use interpolation formula to get the IRR. Somebody who wants to practice can practice this, but not required for your exam, because in that Excel is allowed. In Excel you can easily compute. Acceptance rule I have already discussed. Disadvantages are there, I have talked. Last technique, profitability index, PI. Many other names, benefit cost ratio, BC ratio, desirability factor. They are all names given to one technique. It is nothing, sigma PV CI divided by sigma PV CO. So NPV and PI, they are on similar terms. There was subtraction, here is quotient. It is ratio between total discounted inflows and outflows. It is computed like this. Normally, if it is more than 1, acceptable, less than 1, project is not good. Acceptance rule all given there. Now, this is all techniques of capital bursting which can be used. Specifically in the new syllabus, they have mentioned NPV, IRR and payback period. So, you should be having knowledge of all the three in detail. So, talking about reference material that you can get, some of you might already be having that, but still for those who are not knowing it, the study material of Institute of Valuers is available on IBBI website. So, all different RVOs, they may be having study materials, but this is openly available for everybody. What you can do, you can go to ibbi.gov.in. On that website, find an icon resources. Under that, there is IPA RVO. The drop down gives you in the end IPA RVO. Under that, once you click there, you get 14th May 2019 study material for valuation examination SFA category. There is one study material available for land and building, plant and machinery, but you are interested in this SFA category. This is a comprehensive study material. I don't say everything will come out of that exam, but it is covering almost all the topics. Different RVOs are making it available for their own students, but this RVO has given it to the IBBI for open availability. Now in next sessions to come, I'll be talking about different more reference materials which you may not be having. So we'll be talking separately topic wise in next sessions. Here is first strategic tip I'm going to talk about. Again, it revolves around negative marking. Sometimes people have too much of phobia about few topics. Few topics are not clear to me. For example, in my case, it was laws. The 18 marks laws, they were very difficult for me. Now, the lesson I have learned from this exam, you can afford to leave so many questions if you are comfortable with the other parts. Now, you have to identify what is strong for you, what is weak for you, and in your stronger part, what is your error percentage? Let us say, assume I have error rate 10%. Means whatever I know very well, even in that, 1 out of 10 questions I do wrong. That is the error rate. Now let me tell you, this person can afford to leave 30 marks questions in the exam easily. I'm not saying that you should leave 30 marks. I'm saying you can afford to leave. You should be comfortable that even if 30 marks questions are not solved by you, you can still pass the exam there. Let's see the calculation. 100 marks. I'm not talking number of questions. I'm talking number of marks. So for 2 marks question, it is like 2 marks. 100 marks. If I leave 30 marks, I'm left with 70 marks. Now, out of 70, if 10% is error rate, 7 marks wrong. For 7 wrong marks, I think it is 1.75 negative marking. 8.75 gone. Still, I am able to score 61.25 marks, which is passing. In today's tip, I am telling you question which is available. If your error rate is 20% in the questions and topics you are knowing, out of 10 still 2 you do wrong. In that case, obviously you can't leave 30 marks. You have to leave lesser. So think about what can be your error rate and leave the questions which you don't know at all. Out of 4 options, picking one is only 25% chance of doing correct if you are randomly choosing. If you know out of A or D is the answer, then there is 50% chance of doing it correct. You can still try it, but not in many questions. First, do all the questions that you know fully. While doing, you have a choice to leave it or attempt and put a mark there that I will come back to this question and check. And you can always go back to any question and check it and correct it or leave it even. So you can use that whatever positivity is provided by this exam. So you should not have knowledge of everything and doing all the 100 marks. You can leave few topics, few things by having hold on few other things. So that is a tip, that you should have question in mind that I can also leave some questions. Don't think that if I don't know everything, I'll not be able to pass. Passing is only 60% marks. But beware of negative marking, because if you do all 100 marks and then obviously the questions that you have guessed, if 75% of those are wrong, you will get so much of negative marks in the exam. So that is a tip for the day. So last segment, objective type questions. I think we have spent a lot of time on all the earlier part. Objective type questions, there are 45 questions in capital bursting that I am having. They were created for some other purpose, but I hope they will help you also. What I'll do, I'll share that document with you, and tomorrow morning I'll share the answers also, and offline after the class tomorrow or before the class tomorrow, we'll discuss the problems in those objective type questions. Thank you.